Right.
Okay. Welcome to the Plan and Zoning meeting. We are going to do a special presentation on urban renewal areas and tax increment financing.
Before we turn it over to Nick with our finance department to kind of walk us through this presentation, I did want to just take a moment to kind of reflect with the commission that, over the past 6 to 9 months or so, we've had a lot of discussion about urban renewal plans and TIF and the commission's role in those processes. Just as a refresher, urban renewal plans come before the commission for a recommendation that goes on to the city council as to if they conform or are furthering the goals of Plan DSM, which is the city's comprehensive plan. The urban renewal plan is the foundation for what allows the city to use TIF financing, which is used for economic development purposes often. That is outside of kind of what we normally see in our day-to-day at the commission level, but I think it's important for us as just being a part of the city, kind of understand how we fit into the bigger process, kind of have a understanding of how does the city use these programs currently. We only have 30 minutes today, so we're going to be really on point. And I just want to emphasize that, given our role, but also the time limitations, we're really today here to get us all on kind of a level playing field as to what does the city do currently with our programs, and then answer the questions the best that we can given the time that we have. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Nick.
Thank you. Just to kind of give you a quick introduction on myself. I've been with the city for about 5 years now. I've been in about 4 different roles with the city so far in that 5 years. Prior to that, I actually worked at the city of Iowa City for about 10, and then worked at the state auditor's office prior to that. So I've kind of worked in government accounting for my career. And so going into this, I kind of wanted to highlight the whole process as we were talking about tax increment financing, the TIF as it's referred to. I kind of wanted to go through this presentation, and then we'll kind of go back to any of the slides if any questions at the end. So if you take note as to which slide you want to go back to, we'll go back and highlight those. A lot of this information kind of stacks on top of each other, so I think that's going to be the best approach for this information. To give you guys the idea of this powerful tool that the city uses, that it uses to be able to reduce blight and stabilize the tax base, and actually and do a lot of different things and encourage the equitable housing opportunities, as well as enhance those sustainable developments as well here in the city, and further what we want to do with from the Plan DSM standpoint. TIF as it sits is actually a smaller component to a broader topic, which is urban renewal. And so to actually get into the TIF information, we need to take a step back and actually talk about urban renewal. Urban renewal is allowed through Iowa code as a broad concept and method of improving the economic development for not just cities, but also counties can do urban renewal law as well. From that, you have to create what's called as an urban renewal area, and those are created by urban renewal plans. Now, those plans, as you guys have seen come across this commission, there's a lot of information in there into those plans. I highlighted some of the big key components of it, which is the purpose of why it was created, is that slum, blight, or economic development. It also has to contain all of the projects that can be done to try and address those goals and objectives within that plan. Once the urban renewal plan is approved at council, it's active, which then allows the ability to move forward with the TIF process as well. From a timeline for the urban renewal plans, what happens is usually the first steps is the staff at the city researches and documents those area boundaries, as well as existing property conditions, to be able to talk about whether it's slum blight, or if it's really an economic development type of urban renewal. That is created alongside with the goals and objectives that are tried to put together that are going to be addressed by the different projects that are done in those areas. If there's a project that is moving forward that is not listed in the urban renewal plan, it cannot be incorporated as part of the TIF process or used for funds within the tax increment financing. Staff goes and engages with the neighborhoods and public to get feedback and know what the goals, objectives, and the different boundaries that should be put in place for these urban renewal plans. Staff also does what's called a consultation meeting with all of the other taxing entities that are affected by the urban renewal and TIF districts. So that would be for us, our main taxing entities that we work with is obviously the school district, the county, communities, the community colleges, and Broadlawns is another one as well. So we actually have meetings that we have them invited to kind of talk about what we're looking at for the urban renewal plans and how it might affect them in the future. One key thing would be if there's a lot of housing that we're anticipating with the urban renewal area, that would affect enrollment for the public schools. So they kind of can then plan accordingly with what we're seeing and what we're trying to utilize within the urban renewal law. Obviously then it also goes to Planning and Zoning Commission here, as well as Urban Design Review Board for approval before it goes to the council for the public hearing on that plan to move that along the process. As things progress in a particular urban renewal plan or an urban renewal area, obviously amendments have to come into play because projects will change and different things has to happen. So it goes through a very similar process as the original urban renewal plan, and a lot of that is where you're adding or removing or updating projects that are within the plan, or altering the boundaries of the urban renewal plan as well. Staff usually amends those annually on an annual basis, but as an example, Metro Center is one where there's a lot of activity that kind of happens in that urban renewal, and that's usually done twice a year. That kind of correlates with kind of our budgeting process and our what I'll get into further is the TIF certification and annual urban renewal report that we have to do every year too. So it kind of correlates with the budget and what's required by state for submission to them. As an urban renewal area, they have different sunsets than what like TIF districts do. There is not actually a sunset by statute for urban renewal areas. The TIF districts or TIF areas are different, so council must actually take action to close the urban renewal area. And that's kind of an overall broad discussion of the urban renewal areas and the plans that create those. I'll kind of get into the next level where we're talking about the TIF areas of the Tif Ordinance, okay? From that, once that urban renewal area is established, a Tif Ordinance must be put together and allow for the flow of the increment to the taxing entities. So you have to have the urban renewal created. You might have the urban renewal created well before a TIF district or a TIF ordinance is passed for that particular area. For example on that is we have a couple of those here currently in the city. I believe it's Northeast Hubble is one where we have the urban renewal plan in place, but there has not been a TIF ordinance or TIF being a debt being certified on that area. And then also there is multiple TIF areas that can be created within an urban renewal area. So if you have a TIF area within an urban renewal area, the increment that is created within that TIF area can be used for the entire urban renewal area or that plan. So we'll see that. I've got a map on a later slide that kind of I can show at least one example from the smaller sized maps that are on the slideshow where you can see where a couple of those are within the city. Now TIF areas actually have sunsets in place. Slum and blight are similar defined as in the urban renewal areas, and those are until they're in perpetuity until the TIF has achieved the plan's goals. And so with that, it's not statutorily, it's when those goals are achieved. Does not mean that the increment will be used by the taxing district, it's just it's available to be used. The economic development type of TIF is actually restricted to up to 20 years after the first year of certifying a debt, so that is the 21 years, and the clock starts once that debt is certified with the state and the county. And like I said, I'll kind of talk about that process in a future slide. So for those that like visual for how TIF functions, I've got two different slides, one language and one as a visual. So I'm going to kind of overall talk about the visual slide first. Whenever we're talking about TIF or tax increment financing, the way that this works is when the TIF begins, there is what's considered a frozen base. Whenever a debt is created, it creates that frozen base. So whatever the value is at that time, all of the taxing entities are going to continue to receive their tax rates on that frozen base as if nothing had changed. So if there's a project that comes into play thereafter that brings the value above what that frozen base is, that's what's called the increment that is generated that can be used for TIF. One thing that I kind of adapted this chart from information that comes from the state. One thing that I altered on this was that green area, that protected levies, that I wanted to address and talk about a little bit further. Even though you do have that frozen base and you have the increment that is available for tax increment financing, there is what's called these protected levies. So the different taxing districts, so the city is one of those. We have a special tax within our overall tax rate. So the city's tax rate is $16.61. One component of our tax rate is our debt service fund. Our debt service fund is $2.96 of that $16.61. That is what's our protected levy. So no matter what gets pulled into the increment, we still get that value for those protected levies. So the county and the school have protected levies as well. So even though increment is used for a particular project, and we'll get into some of the projects that the city uses them for, that protected levy still gets to the city, county, and schools. on that extra value. So they technically get a little bit more than the frozen base during that time. And then after the TIF ends or the increment is not being used by the taxing entity, it is released. This chart does show a 100% utilization over that course of the increment and then is released. So I'll get into best practices or how the city's policy plays of how much increment the city uses, but this assumes 100% utilization of increment. So this, if you don't use all of the increment, it's as if that frozen base moves up if you aren't using all of it. So when the TIF ends or is no longer being used, then all of the taxing entities get to see that full value in play that's not being diverted to the taxing entity for the increment. Again, this is for those that are more of the words versus the chart. It kind of, in a nutshell, tells you the same type of information that I talked about on that prior slide that's in that chart, where you create that frozen base and then any increment is then diverted to that taxing authority, except for the non-protected. To kind of give you an example of what we have currently for urban renewal areas, this is a list of the urban renewal areas as submitted to the state this last certification round that we had December 1st of 2021. So we've had, these were the list of the ones that we had submitted and the council had passed the certifications and what we have on an annual urban renewal report that's reported to the state as well. This is, I know, a little bit hard to see it on the screen, but this is two different maps that we have for within Des Moines. That on the left is the urban renewal area boundaries that we have, and then to the right on the pink side is the TIF districts. As you can see, most of our urban renewal area and TIF districts match. A good example, obviously, all the way at the south, you've got the south side one where it's that nice rectangle that is identical from both the urban renewal area as is in the TIF. Now, if you look at the right, straight above south side, all the way near the top, there is Oak Park, Highland Park urban renewal area. You can kind of see that area in the blue on the left side, but you really only see a little small pink on the right. That's where you can kind of see that the TIF district is different than the urban renewal area. So we've kind of talked about urban renewal, we kind of talked about TIF, and then you've got the urban renewal projects. So you have to have those projects within the urban renewal plans to be able to use TIF for those projects. Some examples of projects that can be funded through increment is infrastructure improvements. That's mainly from the state standpoint, and I'll kind of get in a little bit more of what those kind of mean from the city standpoint. Loans and grants for improvements, that's usually the development agreements that you guys see that go through the urban renewal plans. And then land or building acquisitions and remodeling as well. So those are kind of some of the examples that are urban renewal projects that can be funded by the TIF increment that is generated. Projects must be funded by an issuance of debt or an undertaking of an obligation through an agreement, or usually with issuance of debt for infrastructure projects that the city does, those are actually issuing general obligation debt that's then paid by the tax increment financing. So to give you an example of a pretty encompassing list of city projects that we can and have used increment for, we do that for streets, repairs, new construction, utilities, public facilities, parking system, bridges, and civil and recreational products within the urban renewal areas. And again, usually that's through an issuance of obligation debt, and then that debt is paid off by the financing that is generated by the increment. For economic development projects, those are intended to to identify citywide goals, community revitalization, increased tax valuation, because like I said, that chart that I showed you, it shows the intention of how that increment is supposed to be used and then released. So as well as retaining jobs and growing employment-based, as well as addressing slum and blight in different areas of the city. There is a negotiation that happens between city staff and the developers with a strong focus on that gap financing that needs to be coming into play. I know that's a lot of information. I'm trying to also give you guys an example to try and read through as you're able to kind of look at this and what does it mean. From this, I tried to put a project example together so you can kind of see an example on paper. So if you have a project that has a base currently at $100,000 and the project that you gets completed actually now has a assumed base is going to grow that up to 300,000, that increment is basically from that 200,000 of new assessed value. But obviously the taxable value is different, and based off that taxable value, the property tax revenue that comes into play based off that tax revenue is on here as well, going from 4,400 to 13,200. Okay, so from that you can basically say that the increased property tax revenue that came in above the frozen base is the 8,800. Well, from that, the 8,800 is not available for TIF, right? You have 7,200 that would be available for TIF because 1,600 of it would be for protected levies that would be going towards the city, county, and the schools. Okay. Again, this is just a kind of example so you can kind of read through, and based off the chart that I talked about, this kind of shows you numbers that would actually deal with a specific project. This is just an example that tried to make it easily visual aid to how a project would look. As I said before, staff is required every year to do Tif certifications at December 1. That has to be put into place for every TIF district. You know, as I told you before, we had that laundry list of urban renewal areas that we had. We submit Tif certifications to the county and the state every year on those, as well as if any new ones come into play, and then they'll come off if they are removed. So in that Tif certifications, there's multiple forms that are within that, and it's something that usually goes to council either the first or second meeting in November every year because it has to be submitted by December 1st. It basically, we review, the finance department reviews with development services staff, all of the different TIF districts and determining what upcoming payments are going to happen for the next fiscal year. So the Tif certifications is kind of a future looking approach of what we anticipate going through and needing to be paid in that next fiscal year. They must be certified and eligible, an eligible cost to be certified for that following year. And so it has to be, again, a project has to be within the urban renewal to be able to be funded in that. We'll address questions at the end if you had a question. Okay. The other report that we have to submit to the state every year at December 1st is what's called an annual urban renewal report. Again, it's at December 1st as well, and we have it working in conjunction with the certifications. But the best way to look at this is kind of the previous fiscal year. So what happened in the previous fiscal year? So this past December, we were certifying for fiscal year 23, and we were doing an urban renewal report for fiscal year 21. Because we were in fiscal year 22. So we're kind of dealing with two different worlds in the having to report to the state every December 1st. And when we take these to council, we take them both, the certifications and the annual urban renewal report at that same time in November to the council for approval. So from that, there's an established TIF policy that we go through that kind of incorporates some best practices. That was in conjunction with the development services staff that put that together. They look through making sure projects meet the good public policy practice. They're looking at the financial gap or job retention or expansion. And they also are looking at the assistance to being at or below that 15% total financing. Project generated structure on building value increment is strongly preferred. What that means is they're only really looking at the improvements that are done and not necessarily the land that's already in place. We also internally, for staff, we have what's called a debt review committee. It's one that is currently has the deputy city manager, Matt Anderson, as well as 3 different people from the finance department. Myself, one of my deputy finance directors, and a budget analyst as well is on that debt review committee. That anytime a development agreement is coming up, is going through the negotiations, and they're seeing any non-project generated TIF, or they're exceeding that 15 years or 75%, it's actually brought to that debt review committee to take in consideration if that's worth the good public policy criteria, that it's worth going beyond that 15-year 75% and no project generated TIF. So. Some other TIF policies or best practices, they must not be in a breach of any existing development agreements or in violation of any municipal code or any delinquent debt owed to the city, or have delinquent property taxes as well before they could go forward with any development agreement. Also, when it comes to housing or affordable housing, they work through that in the development agreements of housing to try and get a good mix of affordability and mix of unit types as well as Mid-American energy, commercial new construction programs, and trying to get that sustainable products used and keeping that in mind when they're dealing with projects with development agreements. From a TIF policy as well, the council has a utilization policy that they have for TIF in total. The council policy says the city shall not exceed 75% of the increment available. So if you go back to that slide that I showed that assumed 100% utilization, the city has a policy that we will not use 100% of the increment available citywide. But you can kind of see that some districts are over that 75, but in total, that's what the policy is focused on. As you can see, Metro Center obviously is the largest component of the utilization part, or the amount of increment that is available. So the total valuation that is available for TIF in the city of Des Moines is just under $2.6 billion, and the amount of increment available within Metro Center is 1.9. So you can kind of see that is the gorilla in the room for increment that is available. So, but every dollar that is utilized in increment, it cannot be used for, like I said, the overall city operations as well as the other taxing districts. And that's why the city has put in place the policy of not utilizing 100% and not be exceeding 75%, because we know that it affects other taxing entities as well as it affects the city itself. I wanted to put something visual on here for you guys to see as well. From the 75% policy versus the increment used on all of the urban renewal areas and the TIF districts that we have within the city. This is showing from fiscal year 13 through fiscal year 22, so the current fiscal year that we're sitting in, where we are currently for our utilization. We were up in the 60s. I think it peaked at that 66%, and currently we were just under 40% at the current fiscal year that we're in. Now we are going to see that go up a little bit in 23. This might give a little bit too much detail that you may or may not want, but one thing we're seeing, we're having to pull a little bit more in 23 because the TIF tax rate actually decreased from 22 to 23 because of shifting in, decreasing in tax rates, as well as things being shifted from non-protected to protected levies. So a good example is from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 20, or fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22, there was a change in the school property tax rate that went down quite a bit, and they also shifted some of their levy from non-protected to protected. So that actually dropped the TIF tax rate in Des Moines from about $40 down to 37 and some odd cents. So it was a drastic change for the TIF tax rate between the 2 years, and there's a timing issue there that we have to kind of increase that in the next year to kind of recoup some of those costs that we intended on being able to spend. Another slide I want to talk about on the utilization is kind of showing the fiscal year 14 through fiscal year 22 of how much increment was available in those fiscal years and how much is utilized. So from this standpoint, you can see in fiscal year 14, we had just over $1 billion of increment total available, not necessarily used. And you can see that that percentage is heavily on the used side because that blue is a lot higher, a lot more than the green, which is the what's released. Now, if you fast forward to the current fiscal year that we're sitting in is fiscal year 22, you can see that we're over that 2.5 billion. It's that 2.6 billion that we had earlier in the slides, and our utilization is still at a level that's less than what we had even as a full increment available back in fiscal year 14. And so that green area is what is actually being released to all of the taxing entities as if it was part of the frozen base. Now, there is risks, obviously, with TIF that can cause issues of being able to utilize that in general. The TIF can go upside down when tax base falls below the frozen level, which that can happen in a couple different situations where buildings are demolished or converted to nonprofit. Because nonprofit, those values, if they were on the books and they get converted to a nonprofit, it was a part of the frozen base and then basically disappears. So that can actually create a negative increment in a particular urban renewal area. Also, in general, TIF must be managed carefully just because it impacts all the taxing entities in the short term because you're diverting from all the different taxing bases in hopes that release is higher. Also, there is some municipalities in the past have abused some of the interpretations of the urban renewal law, and it's always kind of up for discussion at legislature and making sure that that's still available and can be utilized long term. I know that was a lot of information. I know I'm a minute over, but if we can do questions, I will try to do as best as I can.
Yeah, I talked to Jason quick, and we'll take a few minutes for questions because
Okay.
it's such an important subject, and we should have a short meeting.
Okay.
This is Chris Draper. Can I ask a few questions? Because especially since we started late, can we ask a few at least?
Yeah, you can ask a question. Just speak up, Chris. It's hard to hear.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. It's after midnight here, and I apologize for being remote. But I liked your slide on utilization, but like when you look at utilization versus available TIF, that could also be argued it really sort of proves how much you overspent versus how much we could have overspent. So I got two questions in the other slides, because I noticed your return on investment slides are actually set at a 3x over 3x as the actual example. So two questions are, what is the average TIF dollars invested per proven gain in revenue increase over 10 years? And we've literally done TIF for over 10 years. What is the average value multiplier per proven dollar invested via TIF for any project completed prior to 2012?
I had a hard time hearing him. Were you guys able to?
Oh. Should I put it
Maybe
on-
could you
should I put it on a YouTube
maybe speak a
comment
little bit
or
louder and maybe break the question down into one at a time? I think or Chris, if you're, I don't know if you can email me.
Yeah, maybe email them, Chris. It sounds like they're kind of complex, and it's really hard to hear.
Okay, can I try one more time? I've turned off
Yes.
Wi-Fi in case the hotel is ruining my signal. I'm sorry. I'm over in, apologies. I've got two questions, and they both revolve around return on investment. I know we see return on investment as seen through the amount of increase in revenue attainable through taxes versus the amount that we invest in TIF, right? So my question is, if we're looking at any project that's actually happened, because the project that is in the slides looks like it's set at a 3x, which doesn't seem consistent with the other projects we see. So if we're looking at the data that we actually do have for projects that we have done over the last 10 years, what is the average TIF dollar invested per proven gain in revenue increase over 10 years? And since we've done it for over 10 years, what is the average value multiplier proven per dollar invested via TIF for any project completed prior to 2012? Did that come through? or was that
Madam
still
Chair,
back?
may I interrupt for a minute? This is a complex question. We don't have very much time, and perhaps another person or two on the commission would like to ask a question. And although the ones that Chris is asking are important, no doubt, I think if they were submitted in writing to Nick, that might be a more efficient way to answer the question for everyone's benefit.
Well, and with
But to be fair, Will, I actually did ask these questions in writing over 5 months ago. It took 2 months to have a meeting, and then now we have 30 minutes where we only got the documents maybe 2 hours ago, and I'm sorry, I don't know the email or what the time zones are right now. So I agree with you. It's a complex question, which is why 30 minutes prior to a meeting where we only got the information on the day of the meeting seems very challenging for us to make any progress on an incredibly complex economic development strategy that we are using every day in this city. So Will, I'm sorry. I agree with you 1,000%. I love it to be in writing. If someone could respond in writing, that would also be awesome.
Chris, perhaps it would be more efficient, actually, if we ask city staff to come up with some kind of a means to satisfy your legitimate questions, and quite frankly, mine too.
Well, yeah, and I think
like
the
that.
challenge, and
That was
it may be
good.
seen actually Chris's questions in writing, but I know some of the conversations we've had in the past with Chris have been more focused on policy, which is policy is set by a city council. Our presentation today is to talk about the program and give everybody a base understanding of how it operates today and those sorts of things. I mean,
I was going to say too,
No, wait. Jason, though, that's not fair. My questions are focused solely on data. What is the data that we have that proves that this is an investment vehicle we should, as planning and zoning, as those who are supposed to be setting the strategy, the city council can accept or reject. We're just an advisory board. I get it. But what is the actual data that proves the strategy we're responsible for influencing is the right strategy that we should be using as a city? That's my question. It's not policy. Policy is like, I like this or I like that. We're saying, I give you 10.
So, I mean, if I
give you
could
back 100 or not?
dumb down the question, I think what you're asking is what kind of data analysis have we done or is available that looks backwards at how TIF has been used. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and Aaron told us it's 0. That's my problem, and that's why having slides the same day of an incredibly complex issue that is at a core element of the strategy we are using seems challenging.
Do you want to move on? Do you want Nick to try to answer that question? Or do you want to have anybody else ask questions?
Does anyone else have questions?
Actually, I had one, but I'll yield my time to the greater good.
Thanks, Will. All right, we'll move on to the meeting. Thank you, Nick. If you do have further questions, I think you can email Jason and he'll get them into the right hands, if that's okay with you, Jason.
Yes, that'll be fine.
Thank you. So we will move on to the public meeting. Welcome, for those of you who just walked in, to the May 5th, 2022 meeting of the City of Plan and Zoning Commission. I will first read the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission other than site plans and subdivision plats, unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or Development Services Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. Applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or member of the commission requests that item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately under public hearing agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the April 21, 22 meeting?
This is Carolyn, so moved.
Thank you, Carolyn. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Chris and Abby, how do you vote?
Chris
Yeah.
approves.
Anyone opposed, raise your hand. Anyone abstaining, raise your hand. Thank you. I will now read the consent agenda items. Number 1 is a request from Kraus Properties, represented by Charlie W. Campbell, for the following property at 2500 Southeast 43rd Street. Determination as to whether the requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM, amendment to Plan DSM, future land use classification from business park to industrial use, rezone property from EX mixed use district to I1 or I2 industrial district to allow use of property as a truck parking facility. Is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? This will remain on consent. Item number 2, request from Brixmer Holdings 10 LLC, represented by ARC Holdings LLC, Adam Cockerill, for review and approval of a public hearing site plan Scooters Coffee located at 4100 Merle Hay Road for type 2 design alternatives A through F. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to hear this item tonight? Anyone in the public? All right.
If you wanted this item to be discussed with the presentation, then please raise your hand and let us know. Okay, thank you.
Sorry for all of you.
No worries.
That's okay. So we will hear item number 2. The only item for consent tonight is item number 1. Do I have a motion to move consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Carolyn. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Abby and Chris, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We will now move on to the public hearing items, and we will hear item number 2 first.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Michael Delp, Planning Staff. So the applicant is proposing a 669 square foot kiosk-style drive-through building here for relief with these waivers here for type 2 design alternatives. The proposed property is located in this commercial center along the Merle Hay corridor. It is an existing outlot for parking. It's located south of an existing Popeyes drive-through and restaurant and north of a Chick-fil-A restaurant with a drive-through. To the north here is a Famous Footwear, and that's kind of what it's abutting for a parking lot there. Let's see, I'm trying to focus in here real quick. Kind of going through a bunch here, sorry about that. Let's see. Here's the general layout and sort of vicinity of the proposed site. Down here you can see the orientation of the layout as to Merle Hay Road and orientation towards the commercial center. And here's just a general layout of what they're proposing. As you can see here, they're fronting Merle Hay Road, and then they have their queuing going around here for the drive access on the north side. They have their employee entrance on the back side. They're proposing for bike parking here on the back side also. They are proposing to continue the sidewalk here on Merle Hay, and there will be a connection from the south there to the north on the building. Here's just some examples of their proposed landscaping within there. They have a variety of landscaping on their traffic islands. If you can see for the parking waiver here on the south, it's inching a little bit into that front yard, and that's why they're requesting waiver. And this is just a general elevation of the scooter buildings. It's similar to the previous scooters building that was presented to this commission. There's brick facade there, the drive-through window, and the sort of front-facing frontage window there. Here's the staff proposal. Staff is supportive of this because it's generally an auto-oriented corridor. There's existing uses to the north and south that are sort of consistent with what's being proposed here. The Popeye's Chicken on the north side has a 35-foot setback, and that's similar to what's being asked with the Scooter's Coffee. The Chick-fil-A to the south has a drive-through in the front yard too, and that's pretty consistent with what's being asked from this applicant here. Any questions?
Any questions? All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.
Oh.
You did say it was consistent with what the use is around it. There's a
Correct.
Church's Chicken, Popeye's Chicken, and then Chick-fil-A as well, and those are all drive-through heavy as well.
Yeah, if you go back to that, I think that's probably where we're heading. There you go, and zoom out. Just go ahead and give them the full just go ahead and zoom out for the whole thing so we can see the context.
Yep.
This is one that staff, we talked it through, kind of thought about the area. This is just north of Merle Hay Mall. I think you have Casey's across the street right there south
might
of
actually be better.
Aurora. And just with that context and kind of a large parking lot with 2 drive-through restaurants to either direction, we just felt that we could support this request.
Can you pull up that, can you pull up that original design too? Is that grass that they're proposing in that space?
Are you looking just for the general layout or the
Yeah.
landscaping?
Yes, sir. Mulch looks like.
I think that's pointing
That's
to
around the
yeah.
building here, correct. This will be grass.
Okay. And then you said they were proposing a sidewalk. Is there a sidewalk there right now?
Currently, there is to the north, and they're proposing the connection
Okay.
for the frontage of their property.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant present? I thought so. You know the drill.
Yep. Good evening, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission, Wally Peltz, Peltz Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. I want to also thank you for baptizing Brandon, who was a new engineer intern last time, in my absence because I couldn't be here. He said, man, I got it right. I got every vote in one way. So with that said, this is a very similar store. We think this is a great location for a scooter store. It's an existing parking lot. We are taking paving out, adding trees, adding shrubbery, adding green space, but meanwhile still maintaining access. Part of the issues on this one is I have to maintain access to the north for the, which one's that one? That one's Chick-fil-A's to the south, and to the north is Popeye's Chicken. So there's a cross-access easement that I have to maintain. That's why we also have that directional island in that corner to kind of direct everyone around. Pretty much the same store. We know we have pedestrian access. We have a bike rack. We think we got it. So, yep. I think we've hit all the check marks. If there's any questions you might have of me on the design side, I'd be happy to answer.
Can you pull the layout one more time? I want to see that directional that you were speaking about. So with the both stores, the Chick-fil-A and the Popeyes to the north?
Yep, actually the one that's shown right now is not a bad one, or that one. Because you'll pull in off of Merle Hay, that's the main entrance.
Yep.
Then they come around. So right now, it actually jumps into a parking lot at about 32 feet.
Yep.
This extends that stacking entering into that parking lot, so there won't be so much confusion. Because there's a lot of crisscrossing if you've ever been at that Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
It's a little confusing, so this is part of that correction is we're bringing a curved edge all the way along to control traffic coming across. Then you would pull in, and it's directional one way, and that's how you would get into the Popeyes Chicken to the north. If they're exiting from the Popeyes, they have a couple of options to come out and either go out to Aurora Avenue or come through our parking lot with that directional arrow back out
Okay.
if they want to try and jump back onto Merle Hay Road.
Can you scroll down just a little bit more? Neighbors like the design?
We haven't heard any complaints.
Okay.
So,
I think you missed the meeting.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
but
Yeah.
I understood that we got pulled off the agenda, so I'm assuming someone's here to talk to it. So we'll hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this item? Are you in favor? Or in opposition, or neutral?
Yes, in favor, but suggestions.
We'll call it neutral. So, please come up, you have 5 minutes, state your name, address, and then sign in when you're done.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm April Weiss. I'm with the Merle Hay Neighborhood Association, and I live at 2800 62nd Street in Des Moines, 50322. We're in favor of scooters. We really like the fact that they're adding sidewalks, they're adding green space. We would like to see a few additions just to help with that traffic that a couple of people have talked about. That parking lot is horrible as far as traffic goes. Chick-fil-A kind of backs up everywhere, and people just randomly pull in. So we do like the fact that this will help regulate it a little bit. We'd like to see it go a little further in maybe restriping the remainder of the parking lot to just make it clear where the drive paths are to get to this as well as the other businesses. We believe that, you know, we're going to need to have some clear markings and maybe extended curbing just to, I guess, enforce the drive path that they're wanting people to take to get through, you know, that curved parking to get back to Popeyes on the corner. Because there's only the one entry off of Aurora into Popeyes, so that I could envision a lot of people coming off of Merle Hay to get there and having to go through that little bit of a roundabout. So we do have kind of a mock-up of some suggestions that we'd like, and I'll certainly send that on to city staff as well as whoever else I need to send it to. Still learning this, sorry. Oh, perfect, thank you.
It'll take a minute to warm up.
Yeah, and we'll just need that for the record, so.
Okay. Do you want me to leave this copy here then, or just email it in?
If you don't mind leaving it, that's probably as easy thing. But if you can email it before you leave tonight, that'd be fine too, and just take that with
Okay,
you.
okay.
We
yeah.
can, we'll talk to you when the item's over.
Okay. So we've just kind of got this marked up a bit with, you know, additional things that we would like to see, and we have a wonderful city planner as part of our board, and so he's the one that did this beautiful mock-up and inserted the pictures and everything. So it just gives you a better idea of where we are thinking there might be some issues. As I said, overall, you know, we do support the new business. We support, you know, there being something there instead of a parking lot, but we do want we do have the concerns about the drive paths in that parking lot.
So did these issues exist prior to scooters? Okay, so
They're
we
existing now.
could share the responsibility among these? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we'll go ahead, and if you could just leave that there, because Wally might want to look at it while he does his rebuttal.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in favor or opposition or neutral to this item? All right, Wally, you have 5 minutes.
Can I take a look at this? Good.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of staff in the meantime?
Yep.
Down at the bottom, there was a request to do striping in the area to the west, which, as I understand from the map, would not be owned by the applicant.
Is your mic, they can't hear you. Can you just move your mic over closer to you?
I had a question of staff in terms of the request by the Neighborhood Association to do some directional striping in the area to the west of the property as owned by the applicant. I don't know who owns the property there, maybe the mall or someone else, but how would that, if the commission and the city were to allow the striping there, how would that take place?
Yeah, I think that we'll have to have Wally discuss maybe if this is a purchase or if this is a lease and what kind of, I mean, obviously you can see there's some islands on here that kind of outside of the dash line, so there might be ability to do some things kind of off-site in a way, but or at the periphery of the site. So I think I'm glad, Wally, you got to spend a little time looking through those items. I mean, to me, the one that jumped out that I think makes a lot of sense and could be easily incorporated in the site plan is the extension of the sidewalk to the west. The one that runs along the bottom there. But some of the other stuff that's kind of peripheral and might actually be somebody else's responsibility.
What? I did.
There we go. Some of the other stuff. But anyway, I mean, I don't know if that helps, Will. I think we just probably have to have a conversation here with Wally and kind of see where we go.
How I can address most of those are talking about curbs along the drive aisles that are going to be there. And we are actually proposing curbs. I mean, that's the city code. I have to have curbs on all of my drivable portions and on the edges of my parking. Then the islands on the far west end, which are within a non-leased area, so this will be a leased area, is my understanding. That's where we're adding the islands to add trees to accomplish the shade requirements that we need to do for the parking. And so we've made that arrangement with the leasee, I believe. And then to paint stripe that's a maintenance question. That's outside of my purview. I can't commit to painting someone else's parking lot. We can certainly make that suggestion to the lease, is it a leaseor, who would be, hey, that was a part of the recommendation from the community. A lot of those things where they talk about the curbs, we already have. We're connecting to the curb up to the Popeyes, and we're coming around, and we have curbs for all of our parking islands, so I believe we've controlled most of it. Extending that sidewalk to the west, I don't have any issues with that. That's a piece of cake. But the striping one, that gets involved on other people's property, which then I don't have I'm not authorized to do that at this point, if that makes sense. But we can certainly work with staff, if that's what you direct me to do, is to see what we can get done.
Wally, I have a question for you. Along that north boundary, those 4 parking spaces, is there a
Yes.
curve proposed?
There is a curb
Okay.
proposed along
I
that
didn't
edge
see it in
to
the site
create
plan.
that separation. That is correct. That should also calm the traffic.
From the island to the other island?
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. Just kidding, another one. The roundabout section, is that shaded area in the middle? Is that going to be raised or is that just
Oh, no,
striped?
that's all raised on curb. It'll have some grass and some landscaping. On some of them, we've done rocks and some pretty landscaping in it because it's kind of hard to mow it and keep it alive in some places. Other places, we do have grass, so it just depends on what the architect chooses, because we're not the architect on this one, we're just the civil consultant.
Any other questions for Wally?
Yeah, one more. There's quite a bit of topography from the street heading west on the sidewalk. Is that able to maintain an accessible route?
That, I believe, is able to maintain, it'll be code compliant, if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, so the retaining wall in there helps us to accomplish that.
Correct.
Great. Very good.
One question. So it looks like we have a good amount of green space near the building. Is there any seating, or are you expecting people to do like picnics? What do you visualize that area being used?
That actually is not part of their business model. They're strictly a drive-through facility. So that's just for beautification and to meet the ordinance of open space. So we're taking that whole part, that whole thing's paved right now. So we're punching a whole bunch of holes in it to make some grass. So we'll have to bring in dirt and soils that'll allow things to grow.
And then do you have a walk-up window? Or is there-
We do not.
Do not, okay. And my next question, well, what was the intention for the parking? Is that solely for, in staff? Yeah, I think that was my next question.
Say that again?
Was the parking, so I know there's 4 slots in there, looks like there's 6 without counting. At the bottom, was that intended for staff or?
Yep, that's
Or is that a
intended for
requirement?
shift changes.
Okay.
I mean, if we just built it for they usually run around 4, 6 when they're really busy.
Okay.
So our problem is when the parking's not there for the shift change, then the ones leaving are still there, the ones coming in don't have a place to park, so
Okay.
that's the purpose of those spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Wally, just a general comment. I'm so excited to see green in that sea of concrete. So I think you guys did a really great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wally, I have one last question. Could you comment on the status of the scooters over Douglas and Beaver?
I believe that we have made an application to the city council. That's Brandon's project, so.
Is there any plans for like drainage? Will you guys have any drainage issues being at that corner?
I believe we've worked through with city staff on stormwater detention
Okay.
and discharge. There's storm sewer available on this site. That's a much easier site to develop. This one was
Right.
pretty easy for us.
Yep, awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Wally.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to close, well, unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to close the public hearing. All right, we're going to close it. Commissioners, what do you think?
I think it's a good project for the area. It fits in well. It's consistent with the surrounding area. So I would move staff on this project.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Looks consistent with what that area is being used as. So I'd move too.
All right, we have a motion.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? Francis, would you include in that as perhaps a friendly amendment for the staff to make consideration of these recommendations and suggestions from the Neighborhood Association and see if anything could come of that as well?
If I'm permissible, I would allow that friendly amendment.
You would allow?
I would allow it, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, just to clarify, I mean, I think the sidewalk is definitely doable. We'll request, have Wally do that, and then we'll talk to him about the other things and kind of sort it out.
They wouldn't be responsible of the painting, though. That would be like a add-on suggestion to the lease, or?
Yeah, we can't bind a third party who's not here,
Okay.
so, no.
Gotcha.
All right, we have a motion on the floor from Francis with an amendment. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Abby and Chris, how do you vote?
Yes.
This is Chris, yes.
Thank you. We are moving on to item number 3, a request from Tiger Knight LLC, represented by Barry Nelson, for the following property at 1210 and 1220 Army Post Road. Determination as to whether requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM. Rezone the property from limited MX3 to MX with conditions to allow automotive upholstery and automotive detailing uses.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission, Shreyashi Chakraborty, Planning Staff. Item 3 is a continuation from our April 21st meeting. I'm just going to give a very quick recap of the proposal and what was discussed, and then give you an update regarding the staff recommendation. So the rezoning request is for a property at 2010 and 20 Army Post Road. Here's a map showing the property. The applicant currently has a couple uses in the existing building and continues and proposes to continue those 2 uses. The 2 uses include auto upholstery use, which falls under the vehicle maintenance repair minor use, as well as a landscaping company that has outdoor storage, which falls under the storage, distribution, and wholesaling category. At the previous meeting, the applicant had requested to rezone to I2, or I1 rather. The reason for the I1 industrial district rezoning is because of the outdoor storage component that was associated with the landscaping business. I will move on to the conditions that were part of the rezoning previously. That was done in 2020. Sorry, going over to the staff report. I apologize, it looks like I do not have the staff report here as part of the presentation, but I will just relate that on December 21st, 2020, the property had been rezoned from RX1 mixed-use district to a limited MX3 mixed-use district, and that had several conditions that were part of the rezoning, and prohibited certain uses on the property. And one of those uses included vehicle maintenance and repair minor specifically. Staff is, after meeting with the applicant, it was decided that the conditions for the MX3 mixed use limited would be updated to vehicle maintenance and repair minor, except automotive upholstery and automotive detailing use, which are to be permitted. Thank you. So as you can see there on the screen, where you have the text that's underlined, that's what's the new condition that's been updated into the existing conditions, which would allow the applicant to be able to have the automotive upholstery and automotive detailing uses on the property. The applicant has agreed to this updated condition. The outdoor storage would still not be allowed. The landscaping business is allowed under the limited MX3 district. So that's the update to what was discussed with the applicant. I would like to share with you some updated public comment that we received regarding this particular proposal. We received a comment card in support of the project. We also received an email, which I believe was shared with you all from the Somerset Neighborhood Association, and I can leave this here so you can take a look at it and scan through it. And here's the consent map showing the opposition and support for the project. So that's the update that I have regarding this particular item. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time.
Can you show the beginning of that, the last comment, please? Please and thank you. And then what was the second one?
The email.
Yep, that one. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. What's the maximum number of cars that can be in the parking lot, or is there a maximum number if under this conditions?
Yes, that would be based on the square footage, and I can jump up to the site plan here. So the square footage for the existing building is about 13,475 square foot, and I don't remember off the top of my head the number that would be for the parking.
Well, I guess to answer your question, the number of parking spaces shown, that would be the number of vehicles that would be allowed on the property at any time. But if you're asking about the auto repair business, that's required to provide one off-street stall per 600 square feet of space dedicated to that use. So it's really the parking. If this rezoning amendment is approved, they'll have to do a site plan, and that site plan will have to identify the area in that building that's devoted to each use, and then based on those uses, the parking requirement will be set.
Thank you.
Last time we were looking at this property, there was concern about outdoor storage on the south side. Is that not being discussed anymore? Is that off the table?
Yes, if there is storage proposed, it would have to be indoor. The applicant has agreed to no outdoor storage.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you. Is the applicant present? Please state your name address, and you have 10 minutes. Sign in when you're finished.
Good evening, Ed Arp, Civil Engineering Consultants, 2486th Street, Urbandale, representing Tiger Knight, and Barry Nelson with Tiger Knight's here tonight also. I guess I'd like to compliment staff on helping us through this and figuring out what would work for the user. We are no longer asking for outdoor storage, and we feel like this is where we need to be. So thank you, everyone. Be happy to answer any questions.
It sounds like the outdoor storage is no longer needed. So can you share with us what's happening with the vehicles that were being parked out front for the landscaping business?
It was actually trailers, and they're moved inside now. So they're using a space within the building. Oh, sure, if I'm not right. You can try to figure out how much space it's going to take. For the trailers? Okay, so they're working on that, but the trailers won't be parked outside anymore.
All right, any other questions? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Wait, there's one.
What was the original use for the outdoor storage? Was that for the lawn company to be able to store trailers? Was that correct?
It was just trailers. Now, there could have been some other things stored. Actually, the area in the back of the building we thought could be outdoor storage because it was going to be screened, but no longer.
Okay. So it seems like the two key points that you were looking for have been resolved, and would you say you are satisfied?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any commissioners, or sorry, is there anyone in the audience who is in favor of this item? Anyone in opposition? Carol?
Good evening, Carol Maher, Ward 3, zip code 50312. Thank you to Commissioner Lewis, who recommended that this project go back to staff and kept saying that we're talking seats here. So thank you for your direction given last meeting to have a workable solution. I'm excited to hear that the trailers will be moved inside because they really are unattractive. When I drove by on the 19th of April, they were out there and proud, and it does not provide any value to the neighborhood. I hope that too, since the parking lot will need to be brought into compliance, that adequate landscaping and fencing, parking lot striping will be provided, as well as it would be really great to put a coat of paint on that building with appropriate signage for the businesses, because right now it looks a little bit Breaking Bad-ish, for point of clarification. I'm also going to go rogue here because there was the Adam pre-meeting did not have a public comment period. I'm disappointed that the TIF presentation, unlike the Urban Design Review Board, which had their TIF presentation as an item on the agenda, so that adequate questions could be entertained during the meeting, that instead this TIF presentation was done before the meeting. Adequate time was not given for the presentation or questions, let alone public comment.
I'm sorry, Carol. It has to be germane.
I usually get thrown out of city council meetings too.
Well, I'm not
But I
throwing
made
you
my
out,
point.
just, it has to be germane to the item per the
I
rules.
understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, actually, I want to ask this, Carol. I don't know your address. You never say your address, and everybody else does. And so if you would, please.
I will not. I'm not going to dox myself publicly. I write it down here. If you'd like to see it, you can see it. City Council has passed an ordinance that at their meetings you do not have to give your address for those reasons. I give my ward and zip code.
Thank you, Carol. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak in opposition or neutral? All right. Applicant, you do have 5 minutes for rebuttal if you'd like to address anything that the audience brought up. All right. Commissioners, any questions?
I just want to say how happy I am that this is being resolved. As a small businessman and a landscaper, I know how important it is to find space. I'm glad that city worked with this businessman to resolve the issue and allow the space to still be used and continue to have those revenue dollars staying here in Des Moines and go instead of going somewhere else. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin. I'm going to close the public hearing now. And commissioners, what do you want to do? It might be appropriate if you do it. Yeah. Just move staff.
I would like to move to staff.
Thank you, Justin. All in favor of Justin's motion to move staff, please raise your right hand. And Abby and Chris, how do you vote?
I vote yes. This is Abby.
I had one.
Could you, sorry, we can't hear. Can you just speak up? Abby?
Oh, sorry. I vote yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. And Chris, what do you vote?
I had one question. I am curious about the outdoor storage. Is that actually not allowed under MX3? So
I'm sorry, Chris. We can't hear you.
I think I heard his question. That yeah, the outdoor storage is not allowed in MX3, and that's why the previous request was for I1. I think that's what his question was.
that was my question. Yes. And yes, I vote yes.
He said yes.
That was a yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And I think there are some committee and directors reports. Jason?
Yeah, I just want to introduce a few people. You actually got to meet one individual already, Michael Delp with our office. I congratulate him on his first presentation. We knew that it was going to be a consent item, but he might get a shot at it, so great job, Michael. And we also have, I think at the last meeting, the commission was aware of the changes in our legal staff, and you met Lisa, the other half of the dynamic duo. They'll be serving us as Gary Guidelock, who's in the audience there. Welcome aboard. Gary had previously been at the city, left, and then he realized how great it is, so he's come back. So he'll continue to work with us. And then we also have other staff with us. In the back, we have Sarah Hutchison, who's also an assistant planner with the staff, and who we're going to get in front of you guys this year as well. And then Nick Tarpey, sorry, I always said it wrong, who was presented, I think, a few months ago. We're really excited with Michael. The three of them have been here about a year now, and so they've done an amazing job of picking up all the ins and outs of site plans and plats, and we're excited to give them more opportunity to present to you guys and for you guys to get to know them. So that's all I wanted to do, is introduce our new folks for the evening. I don't have anything else to report.
All right. Thanks, Jason, and welcome to all the new staff. We'll see you. Yeah. We'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks.